Much like any project planning, the design process is an approach for breaking down a large project into manageable chunks. Here are the steps in this process as they apply to the design industry. Some of these steps may look familiar because they are needed and followed in many industries when working on projects. You start with a problem, research some possible solutions, brainstorm those solutions, narrow down some initial ideas, evaluate those ideas, and then come up with a final idea. Let's take time to apply these steps of the design process that most graphic designers and creatives will be familiar with. The problem step includes critical questions you need to bring to and work through with the designer. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. Who's the audience? What are the needed pieces? Where are they going to be distributed? When is it needed? Why is it needed? And how will it be executed, produced, and delivered? Keep in mind you can't find a solution until you have a clear idea of what the problem is. Therefore, you, the client, need to bring as much to the designer as possible to explain the problem and your initial solutions. However, the designer also needs to come up with these questions and find some answers. The next step involves research the designer should do, but this should also include ideas you bring to the designer based off your own background research. This phase is critical because without research, many ideas can fail. Gathering notes on the industry and looking at examples of what competitors are doing are key to making sure your ideas are not just simple recreations of what is already being done. This phase can include collecting sketches, photographs, and other data for inspiration and generating rough ideas that may or may not even be pursued. In some cases, creative design briefs may be submitted to the client for review. Brainstorming includes coming up with as many ideas as possible. This is part of the creative process that will take time for the designer and the client to come up with ideas, create thumbnails, consider fonts, and find graphics, and then lay them out in preliminary draft ideas. Going back to research, these first few steps are so important in making sure you and the designer have all the information needed to complete the project. This is not to say that ideas may morph as the project progresses, but initial research and brainstorming will allow for questions with possible answers. The initial ideas step is when the designer narrows down a few preliminary ideas and forms of multiple small-scale design solution. These are called comps. Designers may show you possible color, font, and graphic options, and if needed, a writer or even a photographer may be hired. This phase is also when pricing and production timelines are discussed, such as using commercial printers, developing websites, maybe even procuring URLs, and other items that may need to be purchased for the project. After initial design is determined, the designer will then take more time to fine-tune the chosen idea. There will then be another step to evaluate the final design. At this phase, the client and designer deliberate together on final colors, fonts, and graphic choices for the pieces. Pricing, delivery timeline, and distribution or launching of this piece are also discussed during this step of the design process. The final design step of the process, it should take less time, but still plenty of time. There may be changes at this point, but hopefully they are minor. This is when camera-ready art printed pieces are created or websites are tested for flow and organization. And of course, this is the stage when all the work pays off and hopefully the final piece is distributed to the masses. So this is the design process. And in this course, you will actually get to follow the process when you design a few pieces of your own.